Okay. Hi, everyone. Today we're interviewing the Dane County chapter of Our Wisconsin Revolution is interviewing Nada Elmikashfi. Is that, I say that correct? I should have asked ahead of time. Who is running for a state Senate seat in District 26. My name is Ashley Hudson. I'm the Southwest Regional Organizer of Our Wisconsin Revolution, and I'm here with Daniel Stabin, who is also an OWR member. Just briefly introduce yourself if you'd like to, Daniel.
Yeah, like you said, my name's Daniel. I'm a member of OWR Dane County, living here in Madison. So nice to see you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. All right. So we'll just get right into the question. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. I'm going to give Nada a brief introduction here. I'll let her introduce herself. So if you want to go ahead, Nada.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Nada. I'm a longtime resident of Madison, immigrated here from Sudan when I was 6 years old, and have been a member of Madison's working class ever since. I'm an activist and organizer. I've worked for Governor Evers, Senator Schilling, and currently serve on the Sustainable Madison Committee. I decided to run for office because I saw that the political status quo in Wisconsin was broken, and that having progressive policy agenda items is not enough anymore, that Madison really needed to put forward a candidate who would fight for justice like their life depends on it. Because for many people like me in Madison, our lives do depend on truly working class champions in the Capitol. And so that's a little bit about why I declared to run for office in January.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. All right, we'll just get right into it. Daniel, would you like to lead off or would you like me to?
Yeah, sure thing. All right, well, first question I have is, do you support publicly funded elections, and why or why not?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think that candidates should not receive an automatic advantage in an election just because of the amount of money they have or their friends or family have. I think the current system is classist and undemocratic and really takes away the voice from the working class. You know, people that can't take out loans to fund their campaigns, or people that, you know, have that fight for their community but don't necessarily have the wealth. And so I think that publicly funded elections really are going to move us away from, you know, having money run our politics.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, so right into the next question. So do you favor extending the time frame to vote at the polls during elections to a minimum of 2 weeks ahead of the election date?
Yeah, I think the current system really creates massive barriers to voting, time being one of them, and it's inaccessible for a lot of Wisconsinites. I think citizens of a democracy shouldn't have to wait hours in line to cast their ballots. In many cases, this is really a tactic of racist and classist voter suppression. And so working class people really cannot afford to take time off to wait in line to vote. Black and Latinx voters in particular wait an average of over 40% longer at polling locations than white voters. So I think that contributes a lot to you know, the historic lack of representation of these voices in Wisconsin. Hopefully that changes for the better, but I think it speaks to how our systems of democracy really fail those who aren't white and wealthy. And I think it also goes to show that the Democratic Party has a long way to go in terms of making sure that they are truly representative of every single person in our country and in our state. And so for me, I've had a lot of experience getting out the vote in communities of color, in marginalized poor communities, and there's a lack of voter education, a lack of voter outreach that you know, informs the way our legislation you know, doesn't bend towards racial equity or economic justice. And so for me, that is a big priority in the next 4 years, is making sure that we have really fair elections where everyone is represented, that are, you know, accessible, to make sure that, you know, our democracy is sound.
Great, thank you. Daniel, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so what model or plan do you prefer for redistricting?
Yeah, I support a nonpartisan redistricting process, so one that is modeled after the Iowa model of redistricting, where nonpartisan staff draw legislative maps instead of the state legislature. I think this new model should really explicitly prohibit using incumbent addresses, election results, party registration, or other socioeconomic data as input when drawing districts, just to make sure that our representation reflects our state, and more so that the people are picking their officials, not the other way around.
Great, thanks. Okay, so the next question. So what are your top 3 legislative priorities, and what will you do to move them through the legislature?
Yeah, so for me, my top 3 legislative priorities really stem from equity, education, and climate justice, making sure that in moving climate justice, education, reform, and equity, that we are taking action to first and foremost improve the quality of life of Madisonians, remove disparities by protecting workers, really championing our unions, and providing real material support to underprivileged and marginalized groups. And so that requires an investment into public education, making sure that our teacher salaries are fair, that they are paid living wages, and closing the achievement gap between white and Black students here in Wisconsin, and making sure that we are adamantly fighting for a Green New Deal at a local and state level. And so what falls into that is really making sure that housing first policies are put through, that we are protecting our tenants, because housing reform is the basis of, I think, a lot of equity, and making sure that the people of the city are given a livelihood that is comfortable, that is safe, and that gives them opportunity to succeed. And so those are the legislative priorities that I have going forward, with, a lot of attention given to not just the overarching umbrella items that we want, like, for example, Medicaid for all, but really looking at the ways in which we can alleviate some burdens in the moment. And so moving Wisconsin from a state that terminates Medicaid or Medicare for inmates of institutions to one that just suspends it. So when they are released from county jail, that they automatically reinstate life-saving treatment. And so that is something that Wisconsin can do while we're working to make sure that inmates in our criminal justice system have the health care that they need in the meantime. So this is something that the state legislature can do in the meantime of waiting to enact Medicaid for all or expanding healthcare. And so really looking at how I can help my community in a lot of policy items that have been ignored by our representatives now, our progressive representatives, is also a priority for me.
Thank you. Yeah. So in the emergence from the pandemic, would you support a state-level economic hardship payment and direct payments to residents?
Yes. Do you want me to describe the top 5 components that are?
Yeah. What do you think? Yeah. What do you think would be middle?
Yeah. So those are both, the answers to those are resounding yes. I think universal basic income monthly payments are incredibly important in making sure that people aren't, left hungry or left homeless because of something they can't ignore. I think cancellation of rent, foreclosure, and mortgage payments on primary property and utility shutoffs until the pandemic and recession are over are incredibly important in making sure we're keeping our constituents safe. That includes an immediate moratorium on rent hikes. I think is incredibly important for Wisconsin right now. Universal health care and no-cost COVID-19 vaccination are also a really big priority, I think, for the state of Wisconsin, as well as freezing student loans, making sure that we're instating paid family and medical leave, and keeping our businesses' payrolls going, I think, are really important economic safety nets that we have seen have failed us during COVID-19, but hopefully have shown us what our priorities are going forward as progressives.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so next question, you might have touched on this a little bit, but it's, so how will you guarantee housing to citizens? How will you deal with the financial situation of those facing eviction because of the pandemic? What specific solutions do you propose? Yeah, I think it's really important for us in Wisconsin and in Madison to look at the
the affordable housing crisis that we have. When I moved to Madison with my parents, when I immigrated here, we moved around a lot, and I really wasn't able to conceptualize why that was until I grew older and started working in the legislature in the governor's office. And I was able to articulate that we went through incredible gentrification and displacement that was perpetuated by an affordable housing crisis that continues on in Madison since I was a little girl. And so for me, looking at the fact that 25% of our Dane County residents are extremely rent burdened, which means that they pay 50% or more of their monthly income on rent. Looking at the fact that rent has increased 23% in the past 5 years, while the minimum wage has stayed the same, have really shown that we need to make sure that we are guaranteeing housing, making sure that we have emergency money funding always to direct towards struggling Wisconsinites when things like pandemic happened. I think we need to make sure that we are really making sure that we are pausing evictions for the duration of this crisis, making sure that we are combating discrimination in the renting process, arming our tenants with the legal and economic power to fight off burdensome and predatory landlords is also really important for any legislator, especially here in the 26th district. And so for me, looking at instead of an affordability measurement that's 30%, I think it's on the federal level, that I think is outdated. We look at residual income models, looking at how much families in Wisconsin, in Madison, pay for transportation, for healthcare, for education, and other and utilities, and then whatever is left should be the standard of what they should be paying in rent. I think is going to be a really interesting and unique way where we can look at what affordability looks like in the 21st century. How are we modeling it to fit the economic inequity that we have right now? And so I'm excited to get working on that in the next 4 years. Yeah.
Right, thank you. So will you fight for a single-payer healthcare system at the state level, and do you support single-payer at the federal level?
Yeah, so I think there's no question that our healthcare system is broken and that we must support and really champion Medicare for all on the federal level while expanding Medicaid dollars in Wisconsin. In the meantime, I think the COVID pandemic has shown us that Badger Care must become a public option. We need to allow people to buy healthcare coverage through Badger Care that includes free and accessible mental health care, eye vision care, dental care for all. And I think that because of a very, recently because of a very valid fear of debilitating costs, people have delayed treatment for COVID, and that has perpetuated the spread of the virus. And I don't think we can wait until the 2021 legislative session to start our reform. So I really stand in support, and I'm calling for an immediate enrollment of uninsured people in Wisconsin into Badger Care, and making sure that, healthcare is available for every Wisconsinite during this crisis. And I think that our public health crisis really extends to all Wisconsinites. So we must face the disparities, particularly racial disparities in our healthcare system, and with incarcerated individuals, to make sure that we are including, healthcare as a right into our policy making. That ideal, as I really think that healthcare is a question of humanity, and championing its accessibility in the next 4 years is a top priority for myself, and I would hope that it would be a top priority for every Wisconsin legislator.
Just had to unmute myself. Okay, sorry. Thank you. All right, so okay, so our next question, kind of within the same vein a little bit. So will you pass workers' rights laws helping those who are forced to return to work, but who risk infection from COVID-19? Absent the equivalent of a single-payer system, will you push the state to guarantee medical coverage through Badger Care for those affected this way?
Yes and yes. I think no worker should have to choose between their health and their paycheck, and certainly not the health of their coworkers and their paycheck. So workers should be guaranteed pay during the pandemic, and that I really think the government should support businesses to keep payroll going. and that includes fighting to expand Medicaid and expand eligibility for Badger Care. For me, that also goes hand in hand with championing our labor unions, making sure that we are fighting to repeal Act 10 and right to work in Wisconsin, to make sure that we have unions that fight for our employees, and we should be championing them as legislators going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, so the next question will include a few items. You can just kind of give me a yes or no on whether you support these.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, do you support do you support the propositions outlined in Campaign Zero, which includes ending broken windows policing?
Yes.
Community oversight?
Yes.
Limiting use of force?
Yes.
Independently investigating and prosecuting?
Yep.
Community representation?
Yes.
Body cameras filming the police?
Yes.
Training?
Yes.
The end of for-profit policing?
Absolutely.
And demilitarization?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. So this next question is same theme. It's a little, we found this in the last couple of candidates, it's not quite as awkward written, but it's a little more awkward spoken. So I will try my best to get through this in the way that makes the most sense. Okay, so there's several parts to this question. So number 10, so in addition, please respond to the following. So I'm gonna read a sentence and there's gonna be a blank, and I'll read 4 options and you tell me which option you choose. So I will support increasing, leveling, decreasing, or eliminating funding for the police.
Okay. For me, I will support eliminating funding for the police, while we're also working to make sure that we are making our society very equitable, increasing mental health services, increasing aid given into our education system, really fighting for housing for all, to really reduce the need of law enforcement within our communities. I think for me, something that has been really eye-opening is Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was given a question: what does a defunded law enforcement system in America looks like? And she said, go to your nearest white suburban neighborhood. That is what it looks like. And I think that kind of keeping that as a vision for Wisconsin is how we can make sure that we are defunding our police, demilitarizing it, while also making sure our society is safe and equitable in other ways.
Okay, great. And so the next part of that same question is a scenario. A police officer in your jurisdiction has been filmed killing someone they have stopped or arrested. How do you respond?
I would call for the immediate removal of that police officer from the police department, an immediate opening of an independent investigation and prosecution of the police who's killed fairly and justly, but also quickly. And so I guess that's the simple part of it, is making sure that we have these steps that do not let police officers continue serving after they are suspected or accused of police brutality or murder or anything like that.
Okay, great. And then one final component to that question. So just list any other propositions regarding the police that you will fight for.
Yeah, abolishing the bail system, ending the use of lethal force, ending mass incarceration by legalizing cannabis and investing in restorative justice methods, not punitive justice methods, decriminalizing drugs, fighting the military-industrial complex, and making sure that, or making sure that military equipment is not given to police departments, or some of the very few. There's much more that we can do as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Daniel's muted. Oh no, still muted.
So who did you support in the Democratic Party presidential primary this year, and why? And when did you start publicly supporting them?
Yeah, well, I've started publicly supporting Bernie since 2016, and I supported Bernie during this Democratic Party presidential primary, and I've received the People for Bernie endorsement. I was really taken by his commitment to the working class. Really loved that he saw that the government worked for the people and not the other way around, and I felt that equity and looking at all these issues with a lens of the everyday American was something that I had wished we had here in terms of leadership in Wisconsin. And so that really informed my commitment to him during this primary.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right, making sure the right people are muted here. Okay, so this sort of kind of goes into the last comment you just made. So the next question is, excuse me, what is your analysis of the Evers administration's handling of the COVID-19 crisis in Wisconsin, including its handling of the processes leading up to the April 7th election? And then also the same question for the state legislature.
Yeah, I think the governor's administration generally followed CDC guidelines and led with policy backed by science. I did not think Wisconsin went far enough to really combat the risks to the health and economy of our state with I think really fast action that was needed in the beginning of the pandemic. I think they should have acted sooner to postpone the election and extend absentee voting. And I think the Republican-led state legislature's reaction was abysmal and criminal at worst. And I think that their insistence on holding an in-person election bordered on electoral violence. And for me, I think it speaks to a tendency for the Democrats to really negotiate before they get to the table, to not ask for exactly what Wisconsinites deserve. And for me, it showed that we really need to expand the Democratic electorate to make sure that we are flipping districts in Wisconsin from purple to blue, to make sure that we have a legislature in the next 4 years, in the next decade, that won't make the same criminal mistakes that they've made these past few months. And I think that it showed that we have corruption in its highest form in the Wisconsin Supreme Court when they ruled that the executive branch and Andrew Palm did not have the authority to enforce safer at home, even though there was a bill in the legislature that granted them that authority. And so I think that we need to really pay attention to us as Democrats, how much we are asking for, what we are asking for, and if we're negotiating before we get to the table. I think we could have been stronger. We could have acted faster, and that might have resulted in saving more lives than have. And so I'd hope that aggressiveness hopefully we can find it in the next 4 years to combat Republicans.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah. Are you supportive of the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, sanctions?
Yes. Free Palestine.
Okay, so the next question is very similar, but a little different. So do you believe that protesting is a form of speech and therefore the right to do so, including BDS and anti-pipeline movements, should not be punished?
Yes. I think the bipartisan, I was in the Capitol when the bipartisan anti-pipeline protest bill was passed, and I thought it was a complete wake-up call for me to the fact that Democrats are really sleepwalking into bills that hurt the progressive movement, that hurt marginalized communities. And so, if I were in the legislature then, I would have fought very hard to make sure that this bill was not passed on a bipartisan level at the very least, make sure that I'm holding the Democratic caucus accountable for democratic and progressive values, and at most would have blocked that bill completely from passing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So list any unions that have already endorsed you in this race, and which labor endorsements are you seeking?
Yeah, so we are working and waiting to hear back from the Madison Teachers Union, MTI, from the AFL-CIO, from AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, Wisconsin, and from the building trades. And hopefully going forward, we also finish our endorsement process with the TAA of UW-Madison as well.
Great, thank you. So, all right, next question. So regarding fundraising, now there's several parts to this, so I'll try my best to break this up in the way that makes the most sense. I'm gonna mute you, Daniel, for just a second. Okay. All right. So regarding fundraising, how much have you raised for this race to date? I'll just go question by question within this, if that's okay.
So I wrote down a whole paragraph, so you can ask all of them and I'll answer all of it in
Sure.
one.
Okay. So how much have you raised for this race to date? Who are your top 3 donors? What percentage of your total is from these top 3 donors? How much of it is strictly from small individual donors of less than $50? If this is not your first election, please answer this question regarding your last election also.
Yeah, so we are really proud that we have raised over $27,000 at this time and are powered by grassroots donation. So we partnered up with Grassroots Analytics, which is a progressive nationwide organization that helps non-establishment candidates from working class backgrounds to really reach a variety of Democratic donors across the U.S. to kind of push in that grassroots support. And so they had worked with Kelda in the gubernatorial, Kelda Roys in the gubernatorial election, and they chose to work with us now. And so for that reason, we're really proud that our top 3 donations are our biggest. So $1,000 from a physician and 2 $500 donations from working class people in Wisconsin. And so that's only about 7% of our total fundraising. We've had over 1,000 contributions. 836 of those were unique donors of an average of $25 per contribution. So 1,015 of our 1,091 contributions are $50 or less, which is 93% of our contributions in total, which makes this really, really a grassroots campaign. And what's even more, I think, encouraging for us is that we've had 475 contributions come in at $10 or less. So working class people are tossing in the few dollars that they can to really make sure that their voices are represented in the Capitol. And so that is something that we are incredibly proud of here on our campaign.
All right, so thank you. And do you support the legalization of recreational cannabis, including expunging all previous cannabis-related charges and releasing those currently serving time for those charges?
Yes, absolutely. And I also would go farther and say that I support reparations for previously incarcerated cannabis users and sellers, making sure that the business of legalizing marijuana is not gentrified, making sure that we are providing equitable and easier avenues within marginalized communities affected by our criminal injustice system, have ways where they can, start selling legal cannabis in a way that is, equitable to them, that we don't have a couple of corporations that are led by white legislators like John Boehner monopolizing the field and further, propagating inequity within our communities. So that is something that I hope to work on in the next 4 years.
Great, thank you. And now we're on our last question, and then just after this last question, I'll just ask you just for a couple moments just to stick around, just to debrief. But okay, so last question. Okay, so do you have paid staff or consultants working on your campaign, and what percentage of your campaign funding goes to paid staff or consultants?
Yeah, so another thing that we're really proud of is that we're building more than a campaign. We're building a grassroots movement to really take back political power for the working class. And so for me, I truly think that labor is really important, and paying people equitably is as well. And so I came into my campaign thinking that. And so for that reason, we've brought on a really strong team of 4 paid staff, which is about 35% of our funding, which is unprecedented, I think, for state Senate campaigns, but it also was the right thing to do. David O'Keefe is our campaign manager. He was the field director for Judge Jill Krofsky's campaign and has had experience turning out the vote in a pandemic. Isabella Oka is our finance director and previously worked as an organizer for Next Gen Wisconsin, as did Tasha Gestel, our field director, who has multiple years of organizing experience with Planned Parenthood, and Michael Makowski, our assistant field director, who has, previously was an organizer for the DPW. And so our team really performs the core aspects of our campaign. And they all come from organizing backgrounds that are rooted in building coalitions within working class demographics and really bringing the issues of our marginalized communities to the forefront. And so I am really honored that they are helping us, build this movement in District 26.
Okay, great. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, so we will have these videos posted. I guess this is pointless to say to the people who are already going to see the videos. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, best of luck. And we'll talk soon. Bye, guys.